What did God do in the first stages of his divine revelation? What was he trying to communicate with us? We're going to attempt to answer this. Welcome to Mere Catholicism. I'm Marcus Peter. What were the first stages of God's revelation? What was he trying to say to us in those first stages? The Compendium of the Catechism, paragraph 7, tells us from the very beginning, God manifested himself to our first parents, Adam and Eve. He invited them to intimate communion with himself. After their fall, he did not cease his revelation to them, but he promised salvation for all their descendants. After the flood, he made a covenant with Noah, a covenant between himself and all living beings. So from the beginning, with Adam and with Noah, God made covenants with which he could espouse all creation to himself, all mankind to himself. Adam and Eve chose to fall, and yet God promised us a Savior. And with that great proto-evangelium that we see in Genesis 3:15, the Father continues to win mankind to himself. And even with the great flood, he creates a modus of salvation in a new creation, all the while showing himself to be a Father of mercy, love, compassion, and covenant. He wants us as children in his divine family. St. Irenaeus of Lyons, in Against Heresies, he wrote, God formed man without his own hands, and from the beginning revealed himself to them, giving them counsel, calling them to communion with himself, and although they transgressed, he did not abandon them. He foretold salvation to them and their descendants. Pope Pius XII, in his encyclical Humani Generis, when after their wretched fall, he promised the Redeemer to our first parents, God began to manifest himself, give the hope of salvation destined for all their descendants. Because even in our failure, even in our own fall, God doesn't relent in drawing us to himself. And so the great work of salvation is the result of our failure and the result of the divine love of God. So benevolent, so infinite, so omnipotent that he will not yield until he has opened the door for salvation for all mankind. Augustine of Hippo, a receiver of that divine mercy, was so keenly aware of this that he wrote in The City of God. This is in Book 16. After the flood, when God made a covenant with Noah, it was a renewal of his ancient promise that salvation would come, not through the waters, but through the one to come who would defeat sin and death. So what were the first stages of this revelation? The first stages of this revelation was for our salvation. The first stages of this revelation was for us to become family. And when man failed, God decided to work even with that failure and create the plan for our salvation. And he will not relent until you and I are in his embrace. Choose him, and choose him now, because he wants us part of his covenant family. He won't force us, and that is the gift of our free will. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Marcus Peter.